The Galactic Medical Summit had gathered the finest physicians from 47 different species, and they all agreed on one thing: humans were medically impossible. Dr. Ilara Voss stood before the assembly, a holographic display showing the human nervous system rotating behind her. The alien doctors stared in what could only be described as horror. "You're telling us," began Dr. Jacral, a crystalline being whose species felt no physical pain, "that humans can feel this much damage and continue functioning?" Ilara nodded. "Not just functioning, thriving." She pulled up a medical chart. "This is Private James Chen. 3 weeks ago, he was in a shuttle crash, compound fracture of the femur, second-degree burns covering 30% of his body, collapsed lung, internal bleeding." The assembly fell silent. "He stayed conscious for 2 hours, gave medical instructions to save his crew, dragged his commander to safety, and apologized to the medics for, and I quote, being dramatic." "Impossible," whispered Dr. Talara, a Zentari healer whose species could regenerate limbs but would enter shock from a paper cut equivalent. "I have his testimony recorded," Ilara said. "Would you like to hear what he said when we asked about the pain?" She didn't wait for an answer. James Chen's voice filled the chamber, casual and slightly embarrassed. "Yeah, it hurt like hell, but people were counting on me, you know? You just push through it, mind over matter and all that." Dr. Jacral's crystalline structure flickered with distress. Push through it? The pain signals alone should have rendered him unconscious. His nervous system should have shut down to protect itself. "That's what we're trying to explain," Ilara said gently. "Human nervous systems don't shut down. They adapt. They endure. They keep fighting." She pulled up another case. Marathon runner Sarah Nakamura. Stress fracture in her foot during kilometer 35. She felt every step for the final 7 kilometers, finished the race, won silver medal. Another case, surgeon Dr. Michael Okonkwo, developed kidney stones during a 12-hour operation. The pain was described as like being stabbed repeatedly. He finished the surgery, saved the patient, then drove himself to the hospital. "This is a psychological disorder," declared Dr. Vex Thor, a tentacled being whose species would die from the shock of a severe headache. Ilara smiled sadly. "That's the thing, doctors. For humans, it's not a disorder. It's normal." Here's what the galactic medical community didn't understand about humans. Pain for most species was a hard stop, a circuit breaker. When damage reached a certain threshold, the body shut down to preserve itself. But humans evolved differently. On Earth, shutting down meant death. A broken leg on the savannah with predators circling, you kept running or you died. Childbirth causing agony, you pushed through or your species ended. Hunger, thirst, exhaustion, injury. Humans who could endure just a little longer were the ones who survived. So humans' pain threshold didn't become a wall, it became a hurdle, one you could jump over if the stakes were high enough. And somehow, impossibly, humans learned to control it, to compartmentalize it, to acknowledge pain, and then continue anyway. "Let me show you something else," Ilara said, pulling up a brain scan. "This is a human brain experiencing severe pain. See these areas lighting up?" The assembly watched as regions of the brain flared with activity. "Now watch what happens when we give this human a task, a purpose." The scan changed, new areas activated, and somehow, incredibly, the pain signals diminished. Not because the pain stopped, but because the human brain had decided the task was more important. "You're showing us willpower," Dr. Talara said softly, "conscious override of autonomic protection systems." "I'm showing you humanity," Ilara corrected. The real demonstration came 3 days later when the summit was attacked. A radical faction called the Purity Front believed that weaker species didn't deserve seats at the medical table. They had infiltrated the station security and triggered a cascade failure in the life support systems. The station began venting atmosphere. 47 species of doctors, nurses, and medical researchers were trapped in various sections, sealed off by emergency bulkheads. The station's AI calculated survival time, 47 minutes before total atmospheric loss. The human delegation was in Conference Hall 7, 12 humans, including Dr. Ilara Voss and Private James Chen, who had been invited to testify about his recovery. The main computer core is 3 sections away, manual override required to restart life support. Temperature and maintenance tunnels, minus 40 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure, 60% and dropping. Radiation exposure from damaged reactor shielding, lethal levels. The alien doctors looked at each other in despair. No species present could survive those conditions long enough to reach the core. Except one. "Tell me exactly what needs to be done," James Chen said, already stripping off his jacket. "Private Chen, the conditions," the AI began. "Will hurt. Yeah, I got that. What needs to be done?" Ilara grabbed his arm. "James, the temperature alone will cause severe frostbite. The low pressure will rupture your blood vessels. The radiation will give me cancer in 20 years if I'm unlucky," James finished. "Versus 400 doctors dying in 45 minutes. Pretty easy math, Doc." He looked around at the assembly, at species who had spent 3 days debating whether humans were freaks of nature or medical miracles. "This is what we've been trying to tell you," he said quietly. "Pain is just information. It tells you something's wrong, doesn't mean you stop." Dr. Jacral's crystalline structure pulsed with emotion, something Ilara had never seen before. "You'll die." "Probably not," James said with a grin. "Humans are pretty hard to kill. Now somebody tell me how to restart life support before I change my mind and decide to be sensible." They wrapped him in every piece of insulating material they could find, gave him an emergency oxygen supply good for 20 minutes, injected him with every painkiller, anti-radiation drug, and stimulant in the medical bay. "The painkillers won't be enough," Dr. Talara warned. "You'll still feel everything." "Yeah," James agreed, "but I'll feel it later. Right now, I've got work to do." The emergency airlock opened. James stepped into the maintenance tunnel. The temperature readout dropped instantly, minus 40 and falling. Ilara watched his vitals on a monitor. His heart rate spiked. His body temperature began to drop. His hands, exposed to the cold, started showing signs of frostbite within seconds, and he kept moving forward. "Vitals are crashing," Dr. Talara said, her voice tight with concern. "Body temperature down to 34 degrees Celsius, blood oxygen dropping. He's going into hypothermic shock." Over the radio, they could hear James's breathing, sharp, painful gasps as his lungs tried to process the thin, freezing air. "Chen, your body is shutting down," Ilara said into the comm. "You need to turn back." "Almost there," came the reply, words slurred from the cold. "See the access panel?" "Your fingers, James. Can you even feel them?" A pause, then a laugh that turned into a cough. "Nope, guess I'll have to work by memory." The doctors watched in stunned silence as James's vital signs continued to deteriorate. His core temperature was now at a level that would have killed most species. His extremities showed severe frostbite. His heart rhythm was becoming irregular, and he was still moving. "This is madness," Dr. Vexthor whispered. "He should be dead. Why isn't he dead?" "Because he won't let himself be," Ilara said softly. "Not yet." In the tunnel, James Chen's world had narrowed to 3 things: cold, pain, and the access panel in front of him. His fingers didn't work anymore. Frostbite had set in within the first 2 minutes. The painkillers had worn off, or maybe the pain was just too extreme for them to handle. Every breath felt like inhaling glass shards. His vision kept blurring, but he could see the panel. Red, emergency access, computer core. His frozen fingers fumbled with the tools he'd brought, dropped a wrench, couldn't feel it hit the ground. "Stupid," he muttered to himself. "Should have attached them to your wrist." He bent down, agony in his legs, his back, everywhere, and felt around until he found the wrench, used his palm to push it into position since his fingers wouldn't grip. The first bolt turned. His body screamed at him to stop. He ignored it and moved to the second bolt. "James, your heart rate is critical," Ilara's voice crackled over the radio. "You need to—" "Doc," he interrupted, words slow and careful. "Remember what I said? Pain is just information. I know I'm hurt. Noted. Now let me work." The second bolt turned, then the third, fourth, fifth. The access panel fell away. Inside, bathed in emergency lighting, was the manual override system. "I'm in," he said. "Tell me which switches." Back in Conference Hall 7, every doctor in the assembly had gathered around the monitor. Species that had spent millennia perfecting medicine, beings who could regrow organs, telepathically heal injuries, manipulate cellular structures with thought. And they were all watching a human with no special abilities, no advanced healing, no psychic powers, just watching him refuse to die. "Sequence Alpha 7-9er, the AI instructed. "Top row, third switch from the left." On the monitor, they saw James's hand, blue-black from frostbite, reach out, miss the switch, try again. His coordination was shot. "I can't. Fingers won't," he slurred. "Use your elbow," suggested Dr. Talara suddenly. "If you can't grip, push with your arm." A moment of silence. Then, "Hey, that's actually smart." The sound of a switch flipping, then another, then another. "Life support primary systems activating. Atmospheric restoration in progress. Time to full pressure, 8 minutes." A cheer went up from the assembly, but it died quickly as they looked at James's vitals. Core temperature, 32 degrees Celsius. Heart rate, erratic and weakening. Blood pressure, critical. Oxygen saturation, dangerously low. "James, get out of there," Ilara commanded. "The systems are online. You did it. Now move." "Just one more thing," James said, his voice barely audible. "What? What more could there possibly be?" "The purity front? They're still in the system, watching. If I don't lock them out, they'll just shut it down again." Dr. Jacral's crystalline structure flickered rapidly, their species equivalent of panic. "He's going to kill himself for a security protocol?" "He's going to save us," Ilara corrected, her voice thick with emotion. "All of us." James Chen knew he was dying. His medical training was basic, but it was enough to know that his body was in the process of shutting down. Hypothermia, radiation poisoning, frostbite so severe he'd probably lose both hands. The pain had evolved beyond pain. It was just everything, all-consuming, a blanket of agony that covered every nerve. But there was a clarity in it too, a simplicity. He knew what needed to be done. The Purity Front had accessed the system through a security back door. If he could lock it down, they couldn't try this again. It would take maybe 2 more minutes. 2 minutes he wasn't sure he had. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. She'd been a nurse, worked double shifts during the pandemic, came home exhausted, in pain from standing all day, and still helped him with his homework. "Pain is just your body telling you to pay attention," she'd said once. "You listen to it, you respect it, but you don't let it make your decisions for you." James's nearly frozen fingers, he couldn't feel them, but he could still move them, barely, touched the keyboard. The interface was designed for multiple species, which meant it was clunky for humans, but it worked. 1 command, 2, 3. His vision darkened at the edges. His heart was skipping beats. His lungs weren't getting enough oxygen. Just 1 more. "Security Protocol Alpha 7-9er," he whispered into the comm. "Security protocol confirmed. Unauthorized access points sealed. System integrity restored." "James, Ilara was desperate. "James, respond!" "Did it," he managed. Then, "Doc, remember that talk about pain being information?" "Yes? I think my body's telling me it's really mad at me right now." And James Chen collapsed onto the freezing metal floor of the maintenance tunnel, his consciousness fading as medical teams rushed towards his position. The last thing he heard before everything went black was Dr. Jacral's voice, filled with something that might have been awe. "Impossible! He should be dead! How is he still alive?" And Dr. Tilara's response, "Because he's human. They don't know when to quit." The medical bay of the Galactic Summit station had never been so crowded. Doctors from 47 species surrounded a single bed where Private James Chen lay unconscious, his body covered in warming blankets and attached to more monitoring equipment than some small hospitals possessed. "Tissue damage to extremities, severe," Dr. Tilara reported, her voice clinical but her expression deeply troubled. "Both hands will require extensive reconstruction. Radiation exposure is beyond recommended limits. Core temperature is slowly rising, but the damage—" "Will he survive?" Dr. Jacral asked. The question hung in the air. Every species present knew the answer should be no. The conditions James had endured would have killed any of them. Even the most resilient species, the Telsian with their redundant organ systems, the Kravathi with their rapid healing, none would have lasted 5 minutes in that tunnel. James lasted 18 minutes. "His vital signs are stabilizing," Ilara said, studying the monitors. "Brain activity is normal. Heart rhythm is improving. Against all medical logic, yes, he'll survive." A collective exhale seemed to pass through the room, relief mixed with disbelief. "I don't understand," admitted Dr. Vex Thor. "The level of pain he endured should have caused his neural pathways to overload and shut down. How did his consciousness remain functional?" Ilara pulled up a brain scan during James' ordeal. The pain centers were lit up like a star going nova. But alongside them, other areas glowed with intense activity. The prefrontal cortex, the areas associated with decision-making and willpower. "He made a choice," Ilara explained. "Every second, his brain was receiving signals telling him to stop, to shut down, to preserve itself, and every second he chose to continue. Conscious override of survival instincts." "That's not medicine," Dr. Jacral said softly. "That's willpower on a level I've never encountered." "It's both," Ilara corrected. "We evolved this ability because we needed it. On Earth, the ones who could push through pain, even when it seemed unbearable, were the ones who survived. It became part of our biology." She gestured to the sleeping human. "Women who endure hours of labor to give birth, soldiers who carry wounded comrades despite their own injuries, athletes who train through pain to reach new heights, humans with chronic conditions who build entire lives around constant discomfort." "We saw pain as a limitation," Dr. Tilara said slowly. "You see it as a challenge to overcome." "We see it as part of life," Ilara replied. "Something to respect, yes, but not something that gets to make our decisions for us." James woke up 3 days later to the sight of Dr. Ilara Voss sitting beside his bed, reading from a tablet. When she noticed his eyes open, she smiled. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Private." "Did we—" His voice was hoarse. "Did everyone make it?" "Everyone made it, because of you." She held up the tablet. "You're famous, by the way. The medical community is calling what you did the Chen Protocol, voluntary acceptance of non-lethal but extreme pain for emergency situations." James tried to laugh, which turned into a cough. "Sounds way more impressive than really cold and really stupid." "How do you feel?" He considered this. "Like I got hit by a truck made of freezing knives, but alive, so good." Ilara's expression grew serious. James, your hands. The frostbite was severe. We've done what we can, but how bad? You'll regain most functionality with therapy and reconstruction, but it will take time. 6 months minimum, possibly a year. James looked at his bandaged hands, then back at Alara. Could be worse. Could be worse? Alara's voice rose slightly. James, you nearly died. You did die clinically for 37 seconds. Your body endured more trauma than most beings experience in a lifetime, and you say could be worse? Well, James said reasonably, I'm not dead. Everyone else isn't dead. I've got all my parts, even if some need fixing, so yeah, definitely could be worse. Alara stared at him. Then she started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. You're impossible. Medically, psychologically, evolutionarily impossible. Thanks, James said uncertainly. The real surprise came 2 weeks later at the closing ceremony of the medical summit. James was there in a wheelchair, his hands still heavily bandaged, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform. Dr. Zakral stood at the podium, his crystalline structure pulsing with barely contained emotion. For 3 days before the attack, we debated whether humans belonged at this summit, whether their pain tolerance was a disorder or an adaptation, whether their ability to endure suffering made them suitable for the medical profession. He paused, looking directly at James. Private James Chen answered that question definitively, but not in the way we expected. We thought we were debating medicine. We were actually debating courage, sacrifice, the willingness to endure personal harm for the greater good. Dr. Zakral held up a small crystal, the highest honor his species could bestow. The Crystalline Order of Medical Excellence has been awarded 217 times in the past 1,000 years, never to a being outside our species, never to someone who saved lives not through medicine but through sheer force of will. He approached James's wheelchair. Private James Chen, you showed us that medicine is not just about healing bodies, it's about the choice to care for others even when it costs us dearly. It's about pushing through pain not because we can't feel it, but because something matters more. He placed the crystal in James's bandaged hands. You are the first human and the first non-crystalline being to receive this honor. Wear it with pride. The assembly erupted in applause. James, for once, was speechless. Dr. Talara stepped forward next. From the Zentari Medical Council, we gift you this. She held up a small plant in a biostasis field. It grows on our homeland. When injured, it releases a compound that numbs pain. We've always seen this as the highest good, the elimination of suffering. She placed it beside James's wheelchair. But you taught us that sometimes suffering has purpose, that pain acknowledged and overcome can be more powerful than pain simply avoided. Doctor after doctor came forward, gifts, honors. Species that had questioned humanity's place at the summit now offered research partnerships, cultural exchanges, medical collaborations. And through it all, James sat in his wheelchair, looking overwhelmed and slightly embarrassed by the attention. Finally, when the ceremony ended and most of the crowd had dispersed, Dr. Ilara Voss wheeled him to a quiet observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum, stars stretched out in every direction. You changed something fundamental today, she said quietly. The way the galaxy thinks about pain, about endurance, about humanity. James was quiet for a long moment. Doc, can I tell you something? In that tunnel, when it was really bad, I was scared, terrified. I'm not some hero who doesn't feel fear or pain. I know. But I kept thinking about all those doctors, all those species, the things they could heal, the lives they could save, and I thought, if I can just hold on a little longer, they get to keep doing that. He looked down at his bandaged hands. That's all it was, just holding on a little longer. Alara smiled. just holding on a little longer. James, that's what makes humans extraordinary. Every species in the galaxy has limits, hard stops, pain thresholds that, when crossed, shut everything down. She gestured out at the stars. But humans? You have the threshold. You feel the pain, and then you decide whether it's worth pushing past it. That's not ignoring your body's warnings. That's weighing them against something more important. Is that what you'll tell them? James asked. The medical community? I'm going to tell them the truth, she said, that humanity's greatest medical mystery isn't how we survive pain, it's why we choose to. That consciousness, the ability to make choices even in agony, is itself a form of medicine. 6 months later, James Chen returned to active duty. His hands bore scars, and cold weather would always bother him now. But he could grip, he could work, he could function. The Galactic Medical Council had changed too. They established the Chen Institute for Pain Management and Tolerance Studies, not to make other species more like humans, that was biologically impossible for most of them, but to understand how consciousness, willpower, and purpose could influence pain perception, to learn how the choice to endure could be taught, even to species who had never needed to develop it. Dr. Tiala Mathalis became the first director. We spent millennia trying to eliminate pain, she said at the opening ceremony. Humans taught us something different, how to live with it, how to make it meaningful. The research that followed was revolutionary. Species learned meditation techniques adapted from human practices, therapy methods that acknowledged pain rather than just suppressing it, ways to help beings cope with chronic conditions by finding purpose within the discomfort. It wasn't about becoming human, it was about learning what humans had discovered through evolution, that pain and purpose could coexist, that suffering acknowledged and accepted was different from suffering that controlled you. 2 years after the incident, Dr. Alara Voss presented her findings at the Grand Medical Symposium. The title of her presentation, The Pain Threshold: How Human Consciousness Rewrote Medical Understanding. We used to think pain was a simple equation, she told the assembled physicians from across the galaxy. Damage equals pain equals incapacity. The greater the damage, the greater the pain, the greater the shutdown. She pulled up brain scans, dozens of them, from dozens of human subjects in various states of pain. But humans break that equation. Yes, damage causes pain. Yes, extreme pain triggers survival responses. But between the pain and the response, there's something else. Choice, evaluation, the conscious decision of whether to let the pain stop you. A video played. Marathon runners grimacing but continuing. Soldiers carrying wounded comrades. Parents staying awake with sick children despite exhaustion. People with chronic pain building businesses, writing books, living full lives. This isn't superhuman, Alara continued. Every human in these videos felt the pain. Many described it as unbearable, but they bore it anyway, because something mattered more than the absence of pain. Dr. Zochrol, now a close colleague, added his perspective. My species eliminated pain through our crystalline evolution. We thought this made us superior, free from suffering. But we also lost something, the ability to measure our dedication by what we're willing to endure it for. He gestured to a display showing the survival rates from the station attack. When crisis came, we were helpless. Our pain-free existence had never prepared us to function through discomfort. Private Chen, experiencing agony we couldn't imagine, saved 400 lives. Because humans don't just survive pain, they use it. Use it? questioned a young Centauri physician from a newly contacted species. "How can suffering be useful?" Alara smiled. "Because it teaches you what matters. It's easy to claim something's important when it costs you nothing, but when you're in pain, when every signal in your body is screaming at you to stop, and you continue anyway, that's reveals true priority, true purpose." She pulled up one final image. James Chen, now a medical officer himself, working with patients. His scarred hands gentle as he bandaged a wound, his expression focused and calm. "That's the lesson humanity offers the galaxy," Alara concluded. "Not that pain doesn't matter, but that you get to decide what matters more. And in that decision, in that conscious choice to endure, there's a kind of strength that transcends biology, a strength that comes from the mind, not the body. A strength," Dr. Tiala said softly, "that we never knew we needed until a human showed us." The symposium ended with a standing ovation, a gesture borrowed from humans that had spread across the galaxy. Later, at the reception, a young Centauri physician approached James nervously. "Private Chen, Medical Officer Chen, may I ask you something?" James said sure, balancing a plate of food that his still healing hands made slightly awkward. "How do you do it? How do you decide when pain is worth pushing through?" James considered this. "You ask yourself one question. If I stop now because it hurts, what do I lose? And if the answer is something that matters more than the pain, you keep going. But how do you know what matters that much?" James smiled. "That's the easy part. If you have to ask whether it's worth it, it probably isn't. But when you know, really know, the decision makes itself. The pain doesn't go away, you just care about something more." The young physician nodded slowly. "On my world, we avoid pain at all costs. We see it as the greatest evil." "It's not evil," James said. "It's information. It tells you something's wrong, but you're the one who decides what to do with that information. Sometimes the answer is to stop and heal. Sometimes it's to push through because stopping would cost even more." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple," James replied. "Not easy, but simple. And that's something every species can learn, regardless of biology. We all have something we'd endure pain for. Humans just got really good at doing it." Today, the Chen Protocol is taught across the galaxy, not as a way to ignore pain, but as a framework for decision-making in crisis. Medical students of every species learn the principles. Acknowledge the pain, don't deny it. Assess the situation, what's at stake? Choose consciously, is it worth continuing? Commit to the choice, no half measures. And in the center of the Chen Institute, there's a memorial, not to James Chen specifically, but to all humans who demonstrated the principle. Parents who worked through exhaustion for their children, healthcare workers who risked exposure to disease, rescue workers who entered dangerous situations despite fear, ordinary people who discovered that their capacity to endure was greater than they had imagined. The inscription reads simply, "Pain is the price of consciousness. The choice to pay it anyway is the price of purpose." Dr. Alara Voss, now the galaxy's leading expert on human pain tolerance, stood before that memorial one day with Dr. Zakro. "Do you ever regret it, opening the galaxy's eyes to this aspect of humanity? Some species now see humans as pain-seeking, as damaged somehow." Alara shook her head. "We're not pain-seeking, we're purpose-seeking. Pain is just what we're willing to walk through to reach it." She paused. "Every species has strengths. The Telsian have redundancy. The Kravathi have regeneration. The Zakro have pain immunity. And humans?
We have the knowledge that pain ends, that it can be endured, that we're stronger than the worst thing we've ever felt, because we felt it, survived it, and kept living. She looked at the memorial. That's not damage. That's hope. What's the hardest thing you've ever pushed through? What made it worth it? Share your story in the comments. If you enjoyed this story about humanity's unique relationship with pain and purpose, check out my other HFY stories exploring what makes us special among the stars. Subscribe for more stories about humanity's place in the galaxy. And remember, you're stronger than you think. The pain is real, but so is your ability to endure it. Because sometimes the most advanced medicine isn't avoiding pain, it's knowing you